What is up, everybody? It is Kovaz back again with some more gameplay footage with commentary. This is a push that we did last week. The affixes were honestly really good. It was tyrannical, raging, and storming this last week. Really good push week. Probably not going to be pushing much this week since the affixes are fortified and bolstering. Genuinely surprised that bolstering made it past the affix pruning that happened previously, where they were trying to get rid of the less fun affixes. But here we are, just grinding out a vault slots this week. Not going to be pushing. So you can see going into this pack that I get all the way up over the stairs before doing any damage. Reason being, the stairs will count as LOS, and I want to make sure that I am doing full damage during my cooldowns instead of popping all my cooldowns, realizing nothing is in line of sight, and then awkwardly waddling up over the stairs. Another thing you'll notice is that going into each and every one of these packs, I'm going to have a focus target set, and it's going to be to a caster. Reason being, I have focus intim and focus kick macros, and this way I can still main target the mini boss here, or whichever prio target I'm going to be doing most of my damage to, while still getting kicks on the counselor or anything similar. But right here you do see that I make a mistake. I don't swap to that protector mob when he is casting his sacrifice soul. Really, those don't do anything unless they are sacrificing their soul. If they get that cast off without you killing them, then they give damage reduction to everything else in the pack. So my bad on that one, but that's one of the values of doing VOD review for yourself or for others, is being able to see mistakes that you weren't able to pay attention to when you were focusing on other things during the actual run. One last thing to note, the druid did die in this pack, and it's because that mob has a frontal, and it is a very wide frontal. It's something like 180 degrees in front of it. So if you're even remotely close to in front of that mob, it's going to tag you. And right here, just going into the first boss of the dungeon. It's a pretty simple boss, and there's going to be a trick that we show you during this to make it even more simple. The only mechanics that you have to watch out for here are the swirling scythe right there, which all that does is it sends a scythe to your location when the cast is finished, and it doesn't follow you. So cast is going, the second the cast finishes, that is determined where that thing is going to go. And you can see right here that I'm trying to bait the other sides to a similar spot so that I am filling up less of the room. Another mechanic this boss does is the soul echoes that's about to come out. That just targets one player, and then they leave essentially swirlies behind, dropping every second or so. So you can see the shaman right here, right behind the boss. Moves a little bit, drops them, moves a little bit, drops them, moves a little bit, drops them. You don't want to be just sprinting when that's on you, because you can really min-max how little space you take up. Especially if you're melee. Like right here, I'm the only range character, and I'm BM. So if I get it, I can run in circles. No worries, doesn't affect anybody else. But you can see the druid getting it here. He drops it, stutters just a little bit, drops it, stutters just a little bit, drops it, stutters just a little bit. And that way it's not completely awful for the rest of the melee in the group. And then the final non-intermission mechanic is just a frontal. It's always going to be on the tank, and so that's why the tank pulled it off to the side, is so that the big frontal that would or could take up half the room is only taking up a little bit of space. And then right here is where you're going to see what I was talking about, where we can make this boss even more trivial. During this intermission, you want to kill as many of these adds as possible. Each add that reaches the boss and gets sucked in will make the cast at the end of this do more and more damage. But as you can see, we have one rooted just off to the right side of the screen here, and we're just going to leave that rooted. And since it's left rooted, the boss is just going to sit here channeling for an incredibly long time. You essentially turn this fight into a target dummy. And yeah, like you can see it right here. No mechanics going on. We're quite literally just hitting a target dummy in a Mythic Plus dungeon, which I'm not sure if they're going to fix this. It's part of an achievement that you can actually do, because you're going to see the ad will turn into a frustrated soul, and that's part of the achievement. But you know, that doesn't really matter. As long as you can do this, definitely keep on doing it. It's not an exploit, it's not a bug, it's an intended game mechanic, just maybe one that needs to be changed. And you can see right there the cast at the end of that very large channel that the boss does. Always use a defensive for it. It does a lot of damage, and it's the only time during this boss that you're going to need a defensive. A lot of high tyrannical keys. You have to be really smart about your defensive usage. You have to like plan ahead, like, okay, how am I going to use this, so that you have one for every cast. Nothing like that on this boss. It literally just the one thing to watch out for. And then you can also see right at the end there, that big frontal, since we didn't move the boss back to the side, it took up half the room. So if you're a tank, or if you want to tell your tank, definitely pull it off to the side. There was no need for our tank to do it there because the boss was already dead. But definitely make sure that that's known in the groups that you're doing. It makes the boss so much easier when you have essentially the full room worth of space to play with versus half the room. Because if you're caught directly in front of that frontal, when the boss is in the center of the room and that frontal fills up half the room, unless you're like a demon hunter or a mage, you're not going to get out in time and you're going to get one shot. So just something to watch out for. If your tank does not move the boss, never be dropping your soul echoes in front, because you might just absolutely die. Right here, I make a bit of a mistake. I'm targeting the mobs back there, and I should be able to see that my tank is not going to have aggro right here. My pet dies. I try to revive my pet. Thankfully, it does not get interrupted by that storming, but just something to look out for. Your pets can't benefit from misdirect, which is why we don't take it as a BM hunter, which means that you have to be genuinely aware and constantly aware of new mobs being brought into pulls, because your beast cleave is just constantly going, and if your tank just, you know, tosses one little spell out there to pull more mobs into the pack, your pet can very quickly kill cleave and just pull aggro, instant rip. And on a high key, especially fortified, you're not even gonna have time to feign your pet. Right there, I could have feigned my pet if I was paying attention, so that it wouldn't have died. But most of these keys, it's just gonna be a one and done, and then you have to sit there rezzing your pet for 2 seconds. Your pet loses their stacks. It's a huge DPS loss, so you don't want to do that. Going into this pack, 3 things to watch for, at least as the highest priority. 1, you want to make sure that this Risen Arcanist gets kicked on every cast. 2, that little minion, you want to make sure that you're not in the swirly. It's going to be constantly teleporting around. If you're in the swirly, you instantly die. And then 3, you just want to watch the archers and scouts in all of these packs, because the archers will disengage and then start a barrage. It's a big frontal cone. That does a lot of damage. The scouts have a nice knife dance, and that one needs to get stunned or just somehow displaced, because it's a channel that does a lot of AoE damage. And here's the knife dance right here. You can see I intim it, and then it doesn't go off. You don't have to wait for the channel to finish, because it's a cast into a channel, sorry. So you can just interrupt the cast, and then the channel will never go off. It goes on cooldown. And another trick that you might have seen is you can just put a binding down when you think the archers are going to disengage, because they always disengage into the barrage. And if you put a binding down, it stuns them on their disengage, and it also stops their barrage. They don't do the chain. And right here you can see the knife dance does not get interrupted, and it does a lot of damage. I moved to LOS just for a little bit there to reduce damage taken for the group, because I didn't have intim and I didn't trust a trap. Like, there's very low chance that I actually land a trap on the correct target when there are 5 of them like that. So right here you can see we target the Arcanist. We want that one to be the first to die because it has the prio kicks. And then the minion, that swirly is what you need to dodge. It teleports, and boom, if I was in that, I'm instantly dead. And you can see we knock up the barrage. We leg sweep the knife dance, and that's all you're doing in these packs, is just as much damage as you can while making sure you don't die. Nice nice simplification of all of Mythic Plus, right? But it's just knowing what you need to watch out for. So right here, knife dance, we intimate. It's DR'd, but we don't care, because the whole point is just to stop the cast for even a split second, whether it's a knockback, knock up, mini stun. You cannot kick knife dance though. That's the one thing to look out for. And this pack is actually quite dangerous, because we have 2 scouts that we need to be watching the knife dances for, and then there are also 2 archers, so we need to be dodging the barrages for. So right there, you can see that I bait both of the archers out. One of them is a good bait. The barrage is not going towards my group, but when I'm moving out of that barrage, the other barrage was baited straight at my group. Not ideal. And then other than that, they do also shoot. So it's not a bunch of damage, but on higher fortified, it can still do a decent chunk of damage. So if you notice that you're low HP, because let's say a knife dance was going off for a few seconds more than it should have, it's good to just feign death or something similar, because if you get shot by these mobs while you're already low, they can actually kill you. Next pack, it's just one champion, 2 archers. So right here, you're going to see that I try to, or I should at least, try to binding when I think, yep, there's the binding right there, when I think they're going to jump. I'm pretty sure that that binding was too early. I should have delayed it by another 4 seconds or so. But I do get one of them. You can see right there, it gets stunned on the jump. And this one I don't get. If I had delayed it, I would have gotten both of those. So instead, I just intim it to make sure that it, especially in this tiny little corridor, there's not always a bunch of room. So I wanted to make sure that barrage was not going off on my group. But now that those are both on cooldown, both of the disengage plus barrages, the pack just flops. There's nothing else to be scared of. And what I should be doing right here is making sure at the last second, I could have done a little later, but at the last second, I want to refresh my barb shot buffs on myself, so that going into this boss, you can see right there, I refresh it, and I have full stacks going into the boss instead of having no stacks going into the boss. It's just little things that can add up over the course of the dungeon, keeping your stacks rolling from pack to pack when possible, which is also why it's really important to have a tank pull quickly, which, you know, Mythic Plus, it's timed content. Your tank should be pulling quickly, but it's just one of those things that, assuming our tank is playing correctly, we can do to make sure that we do max damage. You can see my cooldowns come up right here, and I'm not using them on cooldown. Reason being, I can see that stage 2 is coming up pretty soon, and stage 2, the boss is going to jump up and start eye-beaming. The boss can still take damage during this, and our cooldowns do big cleave. The boss is also going to be spawning adds. So I wait until the adds are out to use my cooldowns to make sure that I'm doing maximum damage to all 3 instead of popping them early single target, doing less damage overall. You can just main target the boss here and then cleave the Arcanist, but you know, honestly, I'm not sure why I didn't. You can see at the end there, I swapped to the boss. I should have been on the boss the whole time, just making sure we get kicks on the Arcanist. When that's the only mob that you have to watch for, you can really easily just rotate kicks. So no reason that I shouldn't have been prioritizing damage into the boss there. But again, it's one of the values of VOD review. You can see your mistakes that you aren't necessarily thinking about at the moment. So like right there, you know, I was dodging all the beams on the ground. Wasn't necessarily thinking about, oh, which target should I be hitting? I was just like, okay, make sure I get kicks. I'm going to target it. Dark Rush, there have been a couple of these going off. You can see that we always group up. Reason being, it doesn't do cleave damage, but what it does do is leave that green puddle. If you guys are spread out, it'll be a line between each person that had it. And so we just go in a big clump, make sure that it's nice and tight there. It maximizes your space in the room. And you just want to make sure that you get out before the ground effect ticks you. These brutal glaives are absolutely brutal. Surprise, surprise. It puts a pretty big hit on you when it first goes. It's about 40% of my health, 40 to 50 on a key this high. But then the big thing is that this bleed is just constantly going on me for the whole dungeon. I noticed that I'm out of defensives, and so I feign that one, hoping that it would just go on cooldown. Definitely don't do that, because what you can see is the spell did not go on cooldown. It just went on my shaman, and then that means that it also hit the other people in melee, because it is going to do cleave damage to anybody that's in its path. So another mistake, but you know, lose is improve. It's not good to make mistakes, but when you do make mistakes, at least make sure you learn from them. So right there, I'm making sure that I'm putting that as deep in the memory banks as possible. Like, okay, don't feign on this boss unless there are multiple ranged players. Otherwise, it's going to default and go to melee. So right here, I'm expecting a big pull. I'm just going to be popping my cooldowns. Yep, exactly. On cooldown. Very, very big damage. The only thing that you really want to watch out for on these guys is the little fellas. They'll drink a potion, and when they get that potion cast off, they get pretty dangerous. They can either start doing a frontal breath, which not so bad, and you can see the cast we just knocked up there. It's drink ancient potion. But yeah, the frontal, not so bad. The spin that they can do, really bad. The spin does a lot of damage, and it also makes it so that the melee can't hit them. And it also spreads the mobs out, so you're not doing maximum damage. So, especially with raging, that's something you have to watch out for. You want to make sure that you stun them going into raging. And again, another big pull. I wish I had cooldowns. And you can see right here, my pet's taking damage, and so I feign it. Again, I was hitting before my tank had aggro, and my pet almost died because of it. I also used my last stand because that also does count as a defensive for your pet. A lot of our defensives also work for our pets. So Exil will full heal your pet. It does more healing for your pet than it does for you. Your Fortitude of the Bear gives both you and your pet max HP. So right there, I used that just to give him the extra HP. And then the wall that we have, the Survival of the Fittest, also gives our pet the damage reduction. So in situations like that where your pet is dying, don't be afraid to use the defensive for your pet if you know you're not going to need it for yourself coming up. Which right there, again, I could have just feigned my pet sooner, but lose is improve. And here, ideally, the healer would be leaving the pack sooner once we know we're going to be able to kill it, and he would be all the way up already, so the whole group doesn't have to dodge rocks. But very, very minor thing that can be improved on in this dungeon. The healer probably just forgot quite like how long this this staircase is. And these packs coming up can actually be pretty dangerous. They used to be really dangerous back when there was no target cap on the sick bats. So it used to be when they cast sick bats, every bat would target you, and if you're in melee right here, you're not paying attention and sick bats goes off, you'll just get one shot straight up. But they did change that recently, and only 4 bats fixate at a time. So right here, you know, you can see fixate bats go on the druid, and he's not that afraid. You can just pop a defensive when it's not fortified and just tank him for the most part. As a hunter, you don't want to do that. We're a little bit squishy and we're ranged. So you can see here, I'm backing up. I don't mind tanking one pet. You can see the autos are hitting for about 20% of my HP. And I just disengage past him. Only take one auto going through there. But binding shot is also really valuable for us here. You just, right as the sick bats cast goes off, you just binding right in the group or right in front of yourself. So they have to go through it to get to you. And it'll stun them all, which I try to do right here, but a couple of them do get through, and they keep coming. The other thing to watch out for in this pack is the Fell Frenzy cast, and that one is a simple kick. So right here, Fell Frenzy, kick it. And now that the bats are all dead, since these guys are not so scary without the sick bats, it's just getting kicks. We just pull it straight into the boss, because why not take the free cleave and extra time? This boss is pretty simple. He has this Hateful Gaze, which the way that works is it's going to target a ranged player. And then your melee players are ideally going to take turns standing in front of the boss, so between the ranged player and the boss, popping a defensive and just taking the hit. And you can see that I'm tracking that right here. You can see the debuff time left on our tank right now, and we're just going to rotate through. They're right there. Same thing. I should not have turtled that first cast. The tank just moved in late, and I got scared, and I didn't want to take the hit, so I turtled it. But right there, the healer took that one, and we're just going to keep rotating through. Depending on the timing here, it looks like it's probably going to be the shaman or the druid that takes this next one. And then other than that, the only other mechanics that you have to watch out for, there's a stomp, which is just an AoE knockback that hits the whole group, and it does a pretty decent amount of damage. So if you're already low, make sure you use a defensive for that. And then there is also the Fell Vomit that goes on players. You can see the green line that's going from the outside of the room to a player, and that line is just showing where those green swirlies are going to go. It's going to follow that line, and you want to maximize the room that you have. So you can see that we're just getting them out to the outside. It used to be that would bug out sometimes, and it would tell you that you have the mechanic on you, but there would be no line. So it was just a crapshoot as to where you were going to place it. I'm really glad that they seem to have fixed that, because it didn't happen at all during this run. So like right here, if there was a stomp coming out and I'm low HP, I for sure want to use something. The stomp does like 70% of your HP. It's the only thing that you really have to watch out for during this fight, assuming we're rotating correctly. So right there, I can see that my druid's there. I don't have to pop a cooldown for the Hateful Gaze, because you know that the druid's got you covered. And then just make sure that you don't get stomped out into the green. It doesn't tick instantly, but I believe it does still do damage. So the druid right there could have gotten further out. This is sort of the beginning of the end. Not that the boss goes that poorly, but that line right there, not getting all the way out, means that the amount of space that we have to work with goes down drastically. And then, yeah, so this is what I was talking about at the beginning of the end. So one, the druid could have gone further out with that beam, and then two, the monk healer could have called for a backup because he was soaking the gaze, and then he got targeted by the line, and he decided to stay in, which is fine. Like, we kill the boss regardless, but that really cut down the space that we could use. And here we are. So right here, I just turtle that stomp because I don't want to get stomped through all of the green. It doesn't tick instantly, but I don't want to be all the way out there. It's just not ideal. So I know the boss is dying. I know I'm not going to need turtle for the trash coming up. I know that turtle will be back up when I need it for the following boss. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just not going to get knocked back. I'm not going to take the damage. I'm just going to turtle. And right there, you can see you can walk through the green. It does not tick instantly, but if I had gotten knocked back through like 4 of them all the way out there and I have to make my way back, it would have been a little dangerous. Here, we do a really big pull. I like this pull. He takes the entire corridor all the way up to the final thing. So that's why I'm just trying to maintain my barb shot stacks as we go up there. I'm not trying to have my pet pull aggro. I'm dodging mechanics, and I'm just trying to not drop, but, you know, not ideal. We do drop because all the mobs are LOS of us there. And then once they're all grouped up here, that's where we're going to pop our cooldowns. You can see these orbs come out of me every time I do pop cooldowns. That's the Witherbark branch. It is an incredibly strong trinket for BM. The strongest by far, I think. And the way I like to do that is I get 2 of the orbs immediately, and then with 10 seconds left on my cooldowns, right before the orb buff falls off, I refresh it, get another 10 seconds, and each orb gives you 1,000 mastery. So the first 2 that I pick up, it's, you know, 1,000, 2,000. And so for the first half of my cooldowns, I have 2,000 extra mastery. And then right before it falls off, I refresh it, get that 3rd orb for the full 3,000 mastery on the tail end of my cooldowns. You can also just get 1 orb, space it out, another orb, space it out, the final orb. But I would rather have all of that damage up front during my cooldowns, which is why I just do 2 and 1 to make it 20 seconds. It lines up perfectly with your cooldowns, and that's part of why the trinket is so strong for us. But if you're a class with more sustained damage, then you'll probably want to pop it, get 1, kite the orbs around because they'll just be following you. Right before that falls off, you get the 2nd. Right before that falls off, you get the 3rd, and then you have 30 full seconds of buff up time instead of just 20. But so like if you're MM, for example, you have your true shot fully stacked. It's going to be 30 seconds, so you want to delay. And
3,
here you can see
2,
just how dangerous high
1.
tyrannical is. That's unavoidable damage coming out. The mob that's on the outside, it's not a kick that you can, or a cast that you can kick. It's just targeting people with shadow bolts, and it's doing like 90% of our HP. It's really dangerous. So here's another one coming out. You're gonna see, yep, there's the monk
3,
getting absolutely chunked.
2, 1.
And there I am. Yep, getting decimated. So that's something to watch out for in this first part of the fight. And then the other thing to watch out for is the whirling blade. It's just coming from Kurtalos, and it's going to go back and forth in a line. So once he casts it, just make sure that you stay out of that line. We actually hero this first part because it hurts. Like those shadow bolts really hurt. We probably could have saved hero because we thought that this second part was going to be a lot more free. We were just thinking like, okay, cool, everybody use a defensive for the first volley before you're buffed, and then you're totally fine. Which reminds me, always use a big personal for that first volley. That first volley is going to do the same amount of damage as all of the following volleys. It's just that our health is not buffed for that first volley. You can see right here we're about to get buffed, and now we have 3 million HP instead of our normal, 900k. So yeah, definitely use a defensive for that first volley. If you don't, you're going to die every time, unless you're doing like a 10 or something, right? And then the only other dangerous part of this fight, or at least what we thought was the only other dangerous part of this fight, which is why we heroed right at the beginning, was the bees. But it turns out that on a pretty high tyrannical, the dot from the Shadow Ball volley kind of rots your group. So you can see the initial hit isn't so bad, but that dot coming out with the stinging swarm, it's dangerous. So our shaman almost dies, and I think that we do end up having a death to the stinging swarm. I didn't even have the bees, and you can see that I'm dying because our shaman was taking so much damage that the healer was focusing him, and I almost die. So, if we were thinking about it, maybe we hero this boss instead after we get the damage buff. since the first one wasn't going to kill us, but you know, hindsight 2020. And if we did this key again on tyrannical, we would learn going forward, and it would just be okay. We know that we can survive the hits from that first guy. We're gonna just make this next phase go quicker. Right here, stinging swarms going on me. I'm already low HP, so I use a defensive. Sadly, my tank sees the same thing, and he bops me. So there's a little bit of an overlap. Could have been better, but honestly, even through my defensive, I maybe die anyway. And right there, you can see the druid hit 0.1% HP. 0.1%. Honestly, just lucky that he didn't die, and he didn't have the stinging swarm on him. It was just damage. And here, like, I thought it was going the other way. I almost killed myself. A little bit funny, but I think that's pretty much it for this boss. Just make sure as you're running around, you don't run into those green clouds. They put you to sleep. So especially if the purple beam is coming through and you run into a cloud, you're just gonna die. And you know, I didn't specifically say it, but make sure that you're targeting the stinging swarms. They need to die. When they die, they stop doing damage. They also microst on the player that is targeted. So make sure that you actually target swap to them. If you don't, then the person who's targeted is going to die. And they're the mini stuns you can see, and I almost died through my defensive. It's scary. And that's about it. Just rinse and repeat. Same thing over and over again. I think we made it through. That was the 13th Shadow Bolt volley. So that part of the fight, not so dangerous. It's just all of the shit together will slowly rot you. And you know, honestly, not bad overall. I expected lower. 360k without an AUG is pretty good. Pretty good. And you can see that we actually ended up plus 2ing the 25, which, you know, a little bit of a surprise. Sadly, the 27 Galakron's Fall that we got, we did not complete. Which, like, totally on us. That's a very doable dungeon, or it was, especially last week. The timer on Galakron's Fall is very, very lenient. There are a couple of bosses that are tough, and we were not as prepared as we could have been going in, and that's why we ended up not completing that key. But honestly, ideal ending there is getting a Galakron's Fall. We just didn't follow up the way that we should have, and that's why our IO is only 3260 or so. But you know, Mythic Plus season is long, and it's not always about the IO. It's about learning as you go. You know, you fail this key, and it means that you just complete the next one with fewer issues, and that cumulative learning is what's going to end up getting you as far as you're able to go. It's not always about IO. It's about practice until, you know, the final push weeks of the season, and that's when it really matters. So I hope you guys liked watching. If you do enjoy the commentary, let me know. If you would rather just have straight gameplay footage that you can listen to without me chattering the whole time, let me know in the comments. I read them all, and I do take them to heart. So if enough people say, hey, you know, I would really prefer this type of content, I would really prefer seeing this instead, let me know, because I want to make the best content that I can for you guys. And I really appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you next time.